Great. Uh, so thanks so much, Kieran. Kieran Dinwoodie has got a load of different roles, which I can never really remember all of them. So I better let him tell you what they actually are. Um, he's a GP in Lanarkshire. Are you mainly in Blantyre?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's been Scottish Government advisor on chronic pain management. But I'll let you introduce more of what you've been doing, Kieran, and then we'll start asking the difficult questions.
Yeah, no bother. Yeah, so hi, I'm Kieran. I work as a GP in Lanarkshire, and I work as a GP trainer as well. And for the last 3.5 years or so, I think I was involved. Now I'm continue to be involved as the GP advisor for chronic pain. Initially, that was with the Modernising Patient Pathway programme, the Scottish Government, and now it's also with the Centre for Sustainable Delivery, NHS Scotland. So yeah, it just feels kind of like on a journey, and I think the goal is to try and make hard things easier and appreciate how hard this area is. So I think the thing that motivates me is colleagues and actually what people think would be most useful for themselves, the kind of challenges and sort of conundrums that we're all coming up against, and how to work and try to make resources that are helpful. So the reason I'd said to Steve, we had a bit of an email chat and kind of how we wanted to do this, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if find out what people wanted would be most useful. So I know we've got a few questions in, but I'm very, very happy for anyone here today just to ping in any questions to me just now or in the chat, and then we can try and answer them, because the goal is to be as useful as possible for you. I'll be selfish, and it'd be nice to know a little bit about who's here as well, just because then I get a bit of a feel of the room. So that's kind of my story.
Mm-hmm. And I think you've found if you think about starting off, I mean, now you find chronic pain really interesting, and feel you can really help people in primary care. Did you start off thinking it was horrible and complicated, and who are these people, and why do they come and see me? Or
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
did you start that way? Yeah,
Yeah, no,
I thought so.
so I qualified as GP 2013, and I just thought pain was a symptom that you treated with a drug. And then a guy that was my age that I felt very sorry for was a patient, and whatever we gave him didn't get better. And long story short, he was the local drug dealer, and I was his drug dealer. And I found out when the CID came, and then it was Valentine's Day 2014, and I was going home. I was late, of course. I was going to get a doing for that as well. And then I bumped into his wife and the co-op, who then went through me with his son. And I thought, I have to do this better, you know. And I did it from a position of complete ignorance. And I emailed Sabri James, and I said, this is before it all kicked off. And I went, this guy's pain's not getting better. What's the issue here? And he went, oh, do you think he's diverting the medicine? I didn't even know what diverting meant. And I said, what does he mean diverting? And he went, selling it. So I just thought, I don't have a clue. Like, here's me with letters after me. I don't have a clue. So I said, well, you know, after the CID and I'm getting a doing, and all this is true, and tell everyone it. And then you know, he became homeless. His relationships split up. So I just felt awful, and I thought, right, I have to do this better. So he came out to the practice, not the patient, the pain consultant, and he gave us this talk about chronic pain, and he said there's only one thing I prescribe for it. And I was like, oh, what is this drug? What is this drug? So I sat there the whole way through his talk with my pen, waiting to talk down this drug that worked. And he never told us what it was. And at the end of it, he's like, any questions? He's talking about long-term condition, all the rest of it. And I said, yeah, what's the drug? And he went, well, nothing. And it was like a bad joke. It was like a bad joke. I was like, you've come here to give us nothing. And he's like, no, you've given them everything. And by the time they arrived, they're spaced out their face. And so I was like, this is transformative learning, paradigm shift stuff. So I wrote down everything he said. He spent about an extra half hour with him. And then I was like, I think the thing with chronic pain is once you see it, you can't not see it. And then I was like, oh, like all these people coming in with like crazy amounts of drugs, opioids, gabapentinoids, and we were outliers of practice because we cared and nobody should be in pain, and pain's the sixth emergency sign, and all this sort of stuff that we were told that works, and we were just following guidelines because we were. So everything's base mess. And it was like, I'm going on too much, but I don't care. I'm getting recorded and I don't mind. And so it's the end of the day, so give you some entertainment. So yeah, and then what happened was the pain team in Lance were really good was, and Cass McGregor, who a lot of you know, I ended up having a relationship where I could refer people to her directly if there was a bit of vetting and things, and we did a wee quality improvement project, but that really helped my confidence, and I felt supported by the pain team, by Cass, by Savage James, and then I made loads of mistakes. I would you get into confrontations with patients. I would do deprescribing too quickly. I would you name the mistake, I've made it, and I just felt like I was making mistakes as I was going along, and there wasn't a template. So I'm thinking I'm in this situation where there isn't a template for what I'm doing. And every GP that I spoke to about doing it, they thought I was off my head. And like one guy just shook his head, and the guy in the next practice went, he said, "Are you the sacrificial lamb for your practice?" That's what he actually said. So there was no one that thought I was sane. And then I was like, right, okay. And I thought, am I going to end up getting this massive clinic of people with chronic pain that just come to me? And why am I doing this? So then I started auditing it, and I realised that the average most people didn't come to me. Like I audit when I last did it, we had about 185 on it, and the average person came between 1 and 3 times, because the goal was enablement. It wasn't disablement, so to speak, with kind of passive things that just sort of pollute people. So I started to see people kind of actually changing colour, going from grey and hopeless to actually going to pink and hope coming back to their eyes. I thought, well, actually, this is really motivating. It's nice to see this. And then at the same time, kind of realistic medicine came in, and I just thought shared decision making, move what's the matter for me to what matters to me. I thought this just makes so much sense. And then what happened was, I'm probably answering this in a very long way, Steve, but please stop me. There was an interview for this national job that came up, and it came up on the Wednesday. You know how when a job comes up on a Wednesday and the closing date's a Friday, you kind of know they've made, you know how they've kind of appointed someone. But I was on holiday. I says to my wife, I says, what do you think? And she goes, well, you're already interested in it and doing that stuff for free. You might as well apply for it. So I went for the interview just to annoy them, really, and I turned up, and knowing fine well, I didn't know anything about the team. It was Blair Smith and everyone. I said, hi, how you doing? And I said, well, I said, I kind of knew they had someone. That I said, it's fine. I kept saying in the interview, I hope you get the right person. I said, but you'll need a GP. I said, because GPs are the ones that are seeing the majority of this, you know. And they kind of took that on board. So they phoned me at the end of the day and said, before they said that, Blair asked me, goes, what do you think makes a difference? And I said, well, I don't think it's evidence. And he kind of sat back, because I knew he was professor, so I thought I'll wind him up. And he says, I said, I think it's stories. I think evidence speaks to people's heads, but stories speak to people's hearts. And I think you need both. And I said, and I think the most powerful therapeutic intervention in pain management is eye contact, and just validating someone and letting them tell their story and creating that environment where they feel kind of heard and held, and then supported. So at that point, Blair said, well, I want to work with you. And I said, that's very nice. And then they phoned me back and said, we know get the job. And I said, well, that's very nice. And then they said, well, actually, but we've made another job, which was for 18 months, and that was 3.5 years ago. So that's the story.
Excellent, Kieran. Sorry,
I've not answered any questions.
No, and I realised that I skipped your question, which was to know more about people who are attending, and so maybe go. But I think that's right. You start off from a position where you think you know stuff, and then you realise how little you know, and it becomes more and more interesting. But I'll maybe go around. I've got Kathana and Karina down in Tarbert, first on my screen.
Hi, I'm Kathana. I'm the Advanced Nurse Practitioner in Tarbert, and this is Karina Spank GP. We started going to Stephen's course for about 1.5 years now, and we started a chronic pain clinic. And I think we've been in touch with you, Kieran, anyway, to have a wee chat about, because exactly what you've said, one of our patients went from grey to pink, and it was mind-blowing. So we've seen a lot of good things from the help of Stephen and chronic pain stuff as well.
And Tina? Oh, not ready.
Yeah, hi. No, I'm Tina. I'm a patient who's benefited greatly from pain management program, I've been grey and I've gone pink. And I tell my story to other groups now going through the programme. So that also helps me actually as well. So that's me.
And Rona?
Hi. Sorry, just trying to get my camera to work. Yeah, I'm Rona Hamilton. I'm one of the first contact physios down in Helensburgh. I see people in the GP surgery and then sometimes out in the community in an MSK clinic. So we see a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm. And Kathy?
Hi there, I'm Kathy Ford. I work as a locum GP, mainly Argyll area. And I've kind of been following your series for a long time, Stephen, but I haven't managed to get to many of them. So I often catch up with the ones that you can catch up with online.
Great. Oh, thanks. Yeah. And Neil?
Hi, yeah, Neil Wright, GP in Fort William. And yeah, got an interest in this, and it's quite interesting. I had a couple of really choice presentations this afternoon. I'm sure they're going to make interesting cases coming your way sometime soon, Steve.
Don't have to. You could look after them.
Complex PTSD and long-standing hip pain and won't move my leg. Yes.
And Zoe?
Yeah, hi, I'm Zoe. I'm fairly new. Been in post about 5 months and new to chronic pain as well. So I'm the clinical nurse manager in NHS Highland and Argyll and Bute.
And Audrey? Oh, your mic wasn't working. Sorry. That's right. You'll have to put something in the chat. And Sophie?
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm one of the anaesthetic trainees in Aberdeen. I'm just starting my pain block, and the consultants have forwarded the meeting on to me.
Oh, thanks for coming, Sophie. And Sandra?
Hi, I'm Sandra. I'm a primary care pharmacist in East Lothian. We're looking to set up a pharmacist-led pain clinic, so we're in the very early stages of that.
Mm-hmm. And is it Julie Stewart? Oh yes, you were going to make it. Oh, you're back. That's good.
No, I've been here. I'm just I'm busy in the kitchen because I'm actually at home, so I've put my camera off. My name's Julie. I'm a pharmacist down in Ayrshire and Arran. I work with the pain management team in secondary service, and we've also been doing I've been doing some work in primary care as well. So a bit of a mixture across both sectors.
And Rudo?
Hi, I'm Rudo. I'm pharmacist. I'm a rural pharmacist at Wick, Caithness, and started my independent prescribing. So pain is something that is everywhere, and so when I approach Stephen, I've actually become more interested in it, and it also helps me with our patients. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Liz?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just managed to join you at the end. I work actually with Rona. We work in the same service over in Helens for contact practitioners. And Kieran, I think about a year ago, I don't know if I listened to a little video presentation that I found on YouTube that you talked about listening to patients and validating, and I think it was you anyway. Anyway, I think it's fascinating, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. But my practice has changed a lot as a physiotherapist, I have to say. Constantly changing, but yeah, listening a lot more. So yeah, looking forward to hearing this.
And Rona? I think Rona, you're last, maybe. Or have I gone round in a circle?
Yeah, you've done.
Yeah, I think I've already spoken.
Oh, you've been, yes. Oh, that's funny. Everybody switches round and then you don't know where you've been. Did I miss anybody out? I don't think so. No. Great. So now that you've all said something, you should be able to ask a question. Has anybody got a question for Kieran? Audrey, you'll have to use the chat. I think one of the questions I had from Josie, who's not here tonight, was why do you think some people go on to develop chronic pain? I think there's any common factor you see?
Do you know, I saw that question, that was the first one, and I was like, oh no. I said, I actually don't know the answer to that. And I thought, Steve's there, he's a pain consultant. He'd be able to, that's for Steve. So then, of course, I went online and tried to educate myself and tried to sound knowledgeable. I think, why do some people go on, the question I've got is, why does pain become chronic, or why do some people go on to develop pain? So I suppose the way my mind sees it is that primary pain and secondary pain story, and is there hardware? And we all start off with the kind of GPs, you know, I saw Neil had his hand up, but like, you know, as GPs, or all of us will always be like that, red flags. First of all, is there something underlying it, you know, that was reversible? And I always think of that even before I get to chronic pain, because you need to. And then you're thinking, right, is it chronic? Like, so there's almost that first line of, is there an underlying bad pathology? And then the second thing is there a chronic pathology that's got bad? So somebody's had chronic low back pain, but guess what? They've now got cauda equina after 20 years. So that comes up. I think so. There's definitely something about keeping an open mind and not anchoring. And then you're into the chronic secondary pain of OA is the classic one, rheumatoid arthritis, other things. But then, of course, there's that increasing awareness of primary pain now, where it's you know, there's not an underlying pathology sort of structurally based. And I was just reading the kind of the fibromyalgia guidelines from the Royal College of Physicians, and it's really, really nice because it's got little body maps, and effectively it's nociceptive, neuropathic, or nociplastic. And then the nociceptive is the sort of structural inflammation story, and then the neuropathic is post, you know, like nerve damage. But even when you look at the guidelines, it looks at post-herpetic neuralgia and diabetic neuropathy, and these are tiny conditions compared to what we see day in and out in our practice that make up less than, I'd say, 5% of the patients. And then you're into the kind of neuropathic pain, which is a lot of people's chronic sciatica, or is it? And then the fascinating area is nociceptive pain, this idea of wind up, and that the idea that the brain, you know, you're moving from not just structural problems and signaling problems into the actual processing problems of the brain, and how the brain's you know, effectively got traumatized, and its sensors are so overactive and maladaptive that it's given too much information. And then you're into the mood story as well, how the mood and the pain are, like I often say in consultations, it's like brother and sister to people, and that probably emphasises why the NICE guidelines have emphasised antidepressants. So I was involved, I'm giving long answers to short questions, I'm sorry, but I was involved with there's a hot topics thing that's coming out, looking at all the evidence for analgesics and MSK pain and neuropathic pain. And you know, I think the thing that's fascinating is that for having patients that are having informed decisions, what are the NNTs of these medicines? And actually, the NNTs of antidepressants are often much lower than antidepressants of NNTs of analgesics. So I think the thing that I've taken out of the whole pain story is screen for mood. You know, make sure there's no bad stuff, but also I've missed so much mental health alongside it. That doesn't answer the question of why does pain become chronic, though. It just answers the processes in a way. So that's the bit that, like, so fibromyalgia, we did a webinar just this week. And please correct me if I'm wrong, there's more knowledgeable people in this call than me, but we don't know why people actually get it. At the bottom, we can explain the how, but not the why. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I was just listening to. I didn't get to the flipping pain on Tuesday, but I'm going to go back and watch it. But yeah, I was just listening to Earring Pain, where they were talking to Stephen Ward, who's in the Faculty of Pain Medicine, talking about how you take blood from a mouse with fibromyalgia and give it to normal mouse, and it gets fibromyalgia as well. It's biological. But I think we get tied up that you know, the processes in the nervous system, the transmitters, the circuits that form, they are all biological things, but they're not necessarily proportional to how much damage there is. And we don't know, I think, yet why. There are a load of risk factors, but there's not a sort of, it's all correlation rather than causation, isn't it, between anxiety, depression, catastrophizing, PTSD, all these things are associated with the development of chronic pain, but we haven't found something that we can treat and reverse and stop things becoming chronic. And has anyone else any questions?
Neil, you had your hand up. I'm not letting you away.
Stretching.
Absolutely. No. I'm just wondering if my question comes in a bit later, because maybe we do a bit of background first. But I guess I don't feel in a position just at the moment to be able to set up a whole clinic, given the strain which general practice is currently under. And I know we seem to say that every year and have done for years on end, but I think that there's definitely some proper evidence for that at the moment. And so I guess my question is going to be how to do this in my personal environment, because I would love to plan to give these couple of patients I've seen today along the lines of my previous trainer, Alistair Appleby, would say, give them an hour, and then 2, 3, 4 weeks later, another hour, and if necessary. Now, you've mentioned that you can open people and enable them, and maybe you don't need, 4 sessions or whatever. And in a sense, it pays for itself, but we've got to somehow get that past the rest of the practice and the community out there and say, well, right, we're going to invest this time. I don't know. I guess it's an open question as to how did you set up whatever you do, and how does that work? And not to take anything away from our Tarbert colleagues, and I was really interested in your talk before. I'm going to have to go back and have a little listen to that one.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Neil. And what would I say about that? I would say that the first 3 years I did it myself, and I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, but I was an enthusiast, and I don't think it's sustainable or scalable. And actually, if you're talking about reaching the 18% of Scotland with moderate pain and the 5% of Scotland with severe debilitating pain, in a nutshell, if I had take-home messages, it would be, number one, it's a long-term condition, not a symptom. My other take-home message, and why would we treat diabetes? With like a 10-minute consultation and a drug, it would be poor care. So I'll say that to people because they often have diabetes at the same time. So number two, I would say, is that it's not fair on the patient or the clinician to try and manage it alone in a 10-minute consultation. So that therein lies the point of it needs a team. It needs a team. Complex things need a team, and that can be someone they love and trust. And that could be someone who's a spouse that can help them take on information, or it can be the primary care team. And with a new contract, despite all its limits, when I before 2019, it was me. After 2019, we've got a pharmacist in the practice. I never had a pharmacist before. We've got a mental health liaison nurse in the practice a day a week. I never had that before. And we're very lucky. We've got occupational therapy practitioner accessible 1 or 2 days a week in the practice. I never had that before. So for the first time ever, it's like a kind of one of these games of Tetris. Like you need the right shape for the right person at the right time. So you've got these skilled practitioners around you. And another practice, I think there's like 910 GP practices in Scotland. Every one of them will have a unique shape. But I think if there's that philosophy through it, that actually say this is a team approach, it's a team sport, and how do we activate that? And of course, that involves third sector as well, who's local. So you've got Pain Concern, Pain Association Scotland versus Arthritis, other ones as well, and then online resources. And I think, the fibromyalgia talk the other day, there was 500 at it, and I said my key message in it is partnership working. It's like, it's how can we work together to make this better for what you want for yourself versus how can I fix this for you? So I think that's what I've moved away from, is fix it mentality through to work with someone for what they want for themselves. So it's more of a coaching conversation. To answer your question more succinctly, we have actually developed a primary care toolkit And this has been designed by primary care clinicians for primary care clinicians. And we've got a flow chart, we've got a consultation model in it, we've got really good CPD links, succinct, useful CPD links. We've got case studies of deprescribing GP practices across Scotland, north, south, east, west, big, small, high deprivation, low deprivation, because I knew that the first thing we'd say is, that'll work there, it won't work there. So that's why we went around the country. And this is patient-centred deprescribing with patients for patients. So we've got these resources now for the first time. We've got consultation is me. So one of the consultations is me with fibromyalgia, a person with fibromyalgia. It's an actor at Glasgow University. But when we did the mock, she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "You're not being abusive enough." And she's been doing it for 18 years, and she goes, "Do patients really behave this way?" I went, "Yes, they really do." And the reality is that we're all big monkeys, and we're traumatized by the patients, and they're traumatized by their life stories, and they transfer that on to us, and we get frazzled, and we want to avoid it. And that's the backstory that nobody talks about. So I think actually, if we're really honest with each other and say that the goal is to make things better, but there has to be that partnership, working together with that respect and that trust and relationship. I think that's the bedrock of it. But so I'm very happy to share the MDT toolkit with you, Neil, or anybody, and it's on the Pain Team Scotland Facebook site. We're with Scottish Government as well, so there is a Pain website on part of the Scottish Government that we're getting all this uploaded to, with kind of Churas as well. So the goal is to make someone like you, in Craig Nevis surgery, almost like a supermarket. Where's the pain aisle? It's there, right? That's what I want. Take it off the shelf and it'll be free. So that's hopefully making it kind of practical and usable.
That'll be really useful, because it totally resonates that fix me, doctor. I want a fix. Sort of what and when you start trying to explore what people want, and you're hoping to be able to guide in. And Tina, I've not been through the process, so you just call me out if there's if I'm out of line. It can be like trying to guide into this idea of how to manage things versus, well, what do you want? I just want to be better. I mean, I've like many folk around the screens, I'm sure, have had people sit there and say, "I just want to be pain-free for a day." And I'm thinking, we're probably not going to get there, but where can we get to? And so I've got my other neighbour head there thinking, how am I going to guide this consultation to hopefully achieve something achievable?
Neil, so you're just going to let me suffer?
Yes, this is the thing.
It's like a bingo scratch card, and let's just be honest. And I think people appreciate authenticity. And I like, my wife's a GP, and she says to me, "I cannot believe you've not got a complaint yet," because I'm just like really transparent with people, and I've not had a complaint. If I get one, I get one. But I think people respect the honesty, and you say, "Look, if there's a tablet that cured this, I'd give you it. There isn't one. Let's work together." And I think what really people want is hope. If you can say there's hope, that's the thing. That uncertainty is the killer, and hope is the enabler. So that's my kind of take on it. Tina?
Yeah, going back to what you said, I mean, I know it so well. I just want the pain to go away. But it is a long-term condition. And I think, Kieran, you've already mentioned with diabetes, say, or something on those lines, a heart condition, we don't make people better, but we help them to live with it. And I think maybe GPs could start to think about guiding patients down the route of thinking, this is chronic pain, it is long lasting, but we can help improve your quality of life. Or there are ways of helping you with this, to give hope, as Kieran's just said, but also to be honest that you're not going to take the pain away. And I think that's the thing, and that's the acceptance part from patients as well. We have to get to that acceptance part, and that's another thing altogether. But from a GP point of view, it's helping them improve their quality of life. I was suicidal, I'll admit that, but I gained so much from the pain management program and can see how it works, but I still got my pain. I'm living with it and I have a good quality of life. So I think that's what it's about, from trying to get GPs to work around that, really, the way you talk to people.
Yeah, completely agree.
What do you think? You were saying that. Oh, sorry, Runa got her hand up. Oh, I'll save my question.
I just think obviously now we've got physios in the practice as well. I mean, we obviously have more time with our patients than the GPs do. I mean, we get half hour with our patients in primary care. And it's like, even today I had a patient with like a 12-year history of pain. And I don't try and say I'm going to take their pain away, but I generally go down the, so what do you want to get back to, or what? So it's not always focusing on the pain, but focusing on the kind of the functional things that they want to get back to, the grandchildren or whatever it is that they actually want to be able to have a quality of life again, and then having that as a goal and say, right, what can we do to help you get to that? But it's amazing the number of people who have had like 12 years of pain but never actually been to see physio and things. And I'm a prescriber as well. I've done my prescribing course, but I very rarely prescribe. I probably give a lot of advice on deprescribing. And even the patient I saw today, I was like, well, if you can manage your pain using these exercises that helped you when you were in the room today, then you might feel you don't need to take those painkillers that give you all the side effects that you're complaining about. So there is lots of different ways, but I think it's good to hear from Tina, to hear it from the patient perspective. But I do think a huge amount of our job, and actually I think it should be more in the training as a physiotherapy, is being a counsellor and listening and helping people to kind of guide them to what they actually want to get out of it, and just listening to their expectations of what they think you're going to be able to do, so that you can correct that at that first consultation, rather than thinking that I'm going to be able to fix them. But yeah, it's a really interesting area to work in. But it's so many different options. It's trying to make sure you get the right fit for the right person. Your Tetris analogy was quite good, Kieran. I quite like that one.
I've basically nicked things from other people, so if I quote something, I've never made it up. My magpie.
Yeah, I'll use that one. That's good. Thank you.
I got it from an HP.
Sorry, Cassandra and Karina.
Yeah, it was just in reply to what Kieran had said and what Neil had said. I think what's most important with the chronic pain, because as Neil was saying, we've done it in Tarbert. Stephen knows I have had an official complaint put in about me of a patient who had chronic pain wanting diazepam, and because I wouldn't give it to her, it's still ongoing now. She's taken it to the Ombudsman. So I think what you need to have is a team around you, because what I have found, if I had been doing it on my own without the support of Karina and without the support of the pharmacist, I would have given up. And you know what, you would have just got to the stage and thought, well, just give them whatever they want, which is not the right way. And I had spent an hour and a half with this patient going through, like Tina was saying, speaking to her, chronic pain, offering her other medication, but because I didn't give her diazepam, she has taken it and it's taken it further and further and further, which is really demoralising and makes you question your own professional. But if it wasn't, I say, for the support of a team, and I think that's really important if you're going to set up anything, to have people that want to support you through it, because it can be really, really hard for the clinician as well as the patients, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, the motivation for me actually in this is NHS sustainability. And the thing that will make the NHS sustainable is the people who work in the NHS. And I work as a trainer, and if you say to people, what are the hardest cohort of patients, it's chronic pain. But that's the greatest yield. If it goes well, it's the greatest yield. But these hard ones, like we've just shared, there's the MDT toolkit. I don't know the way the setup is here. There's not a chat function because I had to put it in the chat. But the MDT toolkit has got a flow chart, and that's exactly it. Like, so, you know, on the right side, it's practice MDT. And the criteria is no improvement despite multiple reviews, not open to rehab working, ongoing distress with pain, harmful polypharmacy, or suspected drug-seeking behaviour. And you know, and those are the groups of people who will not go to a pain clinic. you know, and the GPs or the GP teams are left with them. So absolutely, it's a team sport as well. So, and I'm someone today, I'm going to forcibly deprescribe, forcibly, because it's not safe what they're getting. And I've written to their psychiatrist saying, look, this is the situation we're in, you know, and I'm medically legally responsible for the prescription, you know, so when it goes wrong, it's me, I'm the prescriber. So I've involved them as much as possible. I really have, and we've offered it, but at the end of the day, it's safety. And I think you never want to get to that place, but if you have to, you need backup. So what was really helpful was being able to write to the mental health consultant, or in certain situations, your pain team as well, and say, look, we've got a person who's in this situation, here's their thoughts as well, obviously involve them, but if they don't want to be involved, here's what do you advise? And I think that that's something to bring up. The GP teams are so isolated at times, and people working in a room by themselves, coming in early, leaving late, and getting frazzled, and this can be the most complex person with it. So completely agree, it's a team sport. And I think the thing that I would say that is positive out of it is I thought there would be a lot of people like that, and they're in the tiny minority. I would say less than 1%. I would say that a lot of drug seeking behaviour is actually fear in people that feel judged. And you think I'm a drug addict, and you think that this, but they've got their own trauma behind them. So my kind of stories, there's behind every back pain, there's a backstory. So it's trying to get to the backstory, and the ideas, concerns, expectation, and build that trust. And a lot of people then might say, I need something, but what they're really saying is, I need something. Not I need a drug, but we're hearing drug because we're used to that. So yes, for those absolute outliers, you know, at the end of the day, it's safe, effective prescribing, and if it's not safe and it's not effective, there's no point in prescribing it. But for the other group, there's a lot of fear, and there's just something about how do we create that environment where people feel safe, that they can say it is, well, I think you're judging me, and you can say, well, thanks for being honest, and let's work together.
Yeah, what were the safety concerns that made you move to the forcible deprescribing then?
So a person who's got so many dependency forming medicines at the one time, they're on about 8, and they're getting older, and they're frail, and they're very isolated, and they're not engaging with the team. And I've got a very good relationship with them, but I wrote to their psychiatrist. They went to hospital and got prescribed pregabalin and came out, and they said to me, oh, that's the one thing that makes a difference. And I said, well, you're on 8 other things that don't then, so what's the point of taking them? And I said, well, meet me halfway, let's work as a team. You want to be on that pregabalin, that's fine, but that means we have to look at other medicines, and I will involve your consultant with this. And the consultant wrote back and said, no, these are not indicated at all, we agree with you. So here's a deprescribing plan, and I shared that with her and involved my practice pharmacist, and now they're doing it. And this person can come to me if they want, if they've got an objection, and we'll raise it as a team. But that's where the most complex ones are. They're very rare and few and far between. But I think in that situation, you can't do it alone.
And a thing that I was thinking earlier on when we were talking about patients going off to secondary care, to pain clinics or to neurology or rheumatology, and getting prescribed things that you don't, or recommended that you don't want to carry on prescribing. Or do you find that that happens with people going to, you know, other partners in your practice as well, that they can, how do you get that around that?
Gaming. So yeah, if I'm shut, they'll go to the next person. So that does happen. It did happen a lot, and I think that's another key message. Is we've said partnership and, you know, listening and validating, but I think there's definitely a message about having a consistent approach as a whole practice. So I think it's the value of a consistent message across the team, primary care team, and ideally secondary care as well. And I think that if they're getting the same message, it's not to say we'll never prescribe you a tablet, it's to say if we're prescribing it, it has to be safe and effective, and if it's not effective, there's no point in taking it. So it's almost like an upfront agreement with prescribing. So I'll kind of say that to people, almost like the NNTs of drugs, you know. So they're really, you know, for neuropathic pain, correct me if I'm wrong, but like amitriptyline, and this is for non-complex, non-polypharmacy, non-frail people, because they're obviously going to get more harm from drugs. So, but for kind of, you know, someone who's fairly robust, not in too many drugs, an NNT for amitriptyline for neuropathic pain is about 3.64. You know, gabapentin, you know, like antidepressants are about 4 to 6 as well, SSRIs, SNRIs. Gabapentin sitting between about 6, 7, and pregabalin for neuropathic pain, the last I checked was about 11, and it's been banned in Northern Ireland because of the amount of deaths because of it.
Yeah.
So, you know, there isn't a illicit market for sertraline. So I think if you want, you know, if you could, there's My Street RX. If you want to go on an interesting website, go to My Street RX and you'll find out the value of your prescription drugs, and people can rate them and stuff, and what you're getting and what. So I mean, it's a market. It's out there. So I think I've completely got off topic, not answered anyone's question. But in coming back to the point is with prescribing it, I think that principle of safe, effective, and saying what really helps me is I'll say to someone, right, you know, I've really listened to what they've said, I've seen the world, and I'll say, right, what's your pain score out of 10? I don't mean the worst moment, the worst day, because it's always 10. Like an average in a week, and they'll say, most people say between 7 and 9 or 10. I had a guy at 16 at the moment, but that's another story. And I'll say, right, okay, what's the impact in your life out of 10? And so 0, you can do what you want, 10, you can't get out of your bed. And most people at 6, 7, 8, 9. I say, right, well, let's work together and let's see, try and get these scores down. Let's try X, Y, medicine and a non-medicine at the same time. So information or support. And then if it works a bit, great, we can maybe increase it. And if it doesn't work, what's the point of taking it? So it's almost like getting that upfront agreement with the prescribing. So moving away from fire and forget prescribing to try before you buy sort of thing. And I think if they have that and then come back, then they're more informed about it, that actually 5 out of 6 people don't benefit from this drug and it's not really helped me. So I think having those types of conversation make it easier at the start.
Do you ever make a written agreement with patients?
Good question. I have never made a written agreement with patients, but I think it's a very wise thing to do. And I think if there was one condition, it would be chronic pancreatitis. The people with chronic pancreatitis are the ones that I've been very, very clear at the start about it with them, and then they forget that they've agreed with me, because everyone agrees to get what they want, but they forget what they've agreed to. And so actually, I think on reflection, that would be very wise. And I had someone threatening me lots of things in GMC, but it went away. And but I think having the upfront opioid agreement was very helpful for that guy.
Any other questions in the audience? I often think that pain medicine is quite a small specialty, but we all disagree with each other about what we should be doing. And certainly in the British Pain Society, there's quite a bit of kickback against the NICE guidelines on chronic pain. This idea that primary chronic pain or central sensitization or nociplastic pain is the sensitization of the nervous system, rather than it being some underlying process that you can inject or medicate or stimulate. What do you think? Do you think there'll be new sign guidelines coming out on chronic pain? And what do you think of the old ones, which I'm ashamed to have participated in?
Steve, I thought we were friends. You just set me up here. This is getting recorded. I think that the principle in all of this is do no harm.
Yeah.
The principle in all of this is do no harm. And I think if we've got that as a principle, we can't go far wrong. And the problem is when you get guidelines disagreeing with each other. And I think that, I think what's fascinating about being involved with the hot topics is that's involved really huge data analysis and amazing systematic reviews and grade evidence and amazing people far beyond my knowledge of evidence that are doing all this and cooking it up and showing it to you. It's amazing. But, there is no evidence for opioids beyond 14 weeks in the studies. And I never knew that, so and the people that wrote the guidelines, or wrote that evidence, Purdue Pharma, we know what happened to them. There was a massive lawsuit because oxycodone and OxyContin. So I just think as long as the principle is do no harm, it'll keep us right. And if we're fully, before we send somebody for an appendectomy, they're consented. They won't just say, oh, that'll be good for you. So as people are informed, us first, because we're the clinicians, but the people living with the condition, it's in a partnership, so they need to be informed. So if somebody says to me, well, I want to continue my opioids and this and that, which is actually, it's common, but it's not as common as you might think. A lot of people like, I don't think it's working for me, and they're quite open to it. But if somebody is quite resistant, I'll say, well, you need to be informed about what this does to your body. So you need to read this leaflet, or you need to go to this video so that you're informed about it. And I think if something does go wrong in their life, they can't say they didn't know at that point as well. So and it's interesting because people go through cycles of change. So someone older people, frailer ones as well, they'll be obviously on something for ages, and then I phone them up and annoy them and they hate me, and then but they will listen, and then they'll have a fall and fracture, and then they get scared and they say I want off of it and things. So things can change in their life that people can move around. I think as long back to that kind of consistent message. So I've not answered your question fully. I think there's goodness in both guidelines, and I think that it's about the patient in front of you, but I think the NNTs are very, very helpful when you have an informed conversation with someone, instead of just saying A for a drug, like A, B, C evidence. Well, what's that person's frailty status and their multimorbidity and their addiction history? That all needs to be taken account of it.
And Lindsay, you got your hand up.
I was just wondering about in terms of deprescribing and things, when you went about the deprescribing side of things, was it agreed individual practice level, or did you agree at sort of locality level, or how did you decide on whether it's what thing to focus on? And I suppose with that, did you kind of have then sort of prescribing guides written for that, or how did you go about it?
So do you mean Lindsay, our own practice level, or do you mean the case studies of the GP practices?
Your own sort of practice level, was it a practice sort of deprescribing topic that you decided to go for, or was it kind of agreed across like the sort of area, your local area, or how did, was there a focus on one area particularly? I don't know, neuropathic pain, or you were reducing pregabalin prescribing or whatever, as a focus, and sort of the messaging around that goes out to patients, and in terms of how does it kind of get advertised in terms of, oh, actually, we know that these drugs maybe aren't doing you sort of the world of good. How do we kind of sort of get that message out there that actually maybe we want to kind of focus on that area for a while?
Perfect. So I think the way I did it, I wouldn't do it the same way again. So I just dealt with it as patients came into me. I've just forwarded you a link, Lindsay, because that'll cover what we're going to talk about. So patients would come into me and they'd be an opioid, and they'd been tramadol plus gabapentin plus, and I'd be like, so what's your pain out of 10? 10. I say, well, do you think these are helping you or not? No, not sure. A thing that really helped me was a DN4 questionnaire or an SLANS, but DN4 is what we use in Lanarkshire. So it's the difference between a nociceptive MSK pain versus a neuropathic pain. So somebody's on nociceptive medicines, classically opioids, versus neuropathic medicines, classically gabapentinoids, and you do a DN4, you'll know if it's neuropathic or MSK. And the person's, it takes about 30 seconds. It's just yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then you say to the person, well, that's clearly not helping you. What's the point being on it? And I'd say 9 out of 10 people agreed. And then at that point, it was just like, well, gabapentin, reduce it by a tap 300 milligrams a week, or pregabalin 50 to 100 milligrams every 1 to 2 weeks, and let them do it, sort of thing. Maybe write it down. So that was quite easy, because again, most people weren't entrenched and fixed. A lot of these people were just people living their lives that had been on it for years. I think the better way to do it, from what I've seen, and we've got these case studies now that's really good from practices, is to actually work it as a whole practice level, and say, what drug basically do we think is causing most harm to our patients? And some practices it will be opioids, some practices it will be gabapentinoids, and the practice then says, right, let's just work on one drug at a time. And what practices have done is actually then said, right, say for example it's pregabalin, and I've got letters of practices in the toolkit that have literally done it. So these are letters that have been used and that worked by practices. So they do a search, say there are 100 patients in pregabalin, and they send them a letter giving them information so they're more informed about the limits. And the feedback is a lot of the patients were like, yeah, I didn't think they helped me anyway, and I'm getting that side effect. You know, I can't concentrate. I put on weight. I've got brain fog with it. Yeah, I want to come off of it. So you actually got informed, engaged patients that would come in that says, yeah, thanks for that. I want to be off of it now. So, and then you can do a follow-up letter for the ones that haven't engaged, and it's almost like the ones that are a bit not around the cycle of change as much, and then offer them a pharmacy review or offer them a GP review as well. So that's a really nice quality improvement way of doing it. And then you've got your kind of prescribing, you can use ISD, you can use National Therapeutic Index, but there's a lag, or you can get your practice pharmacist to do kind of before and after data, and then that kind of builds in that sort of quality improvement methodology into it. So I think having a full team, picking it one drug at a time, you know, automating things. And the other thing that all the practice talked about was using their IT systems. So we use Vision, but other ones obviously EMIS, but a lot of people said once you've picked a drug that you want to focus on, take it off repeat as well, and then it's on acute, so it's more visible in things, so that people are actually getting called in for medicine reviews a lot more compared to before. And another GP said to me something really good. She said, people like Newtonian fluids, if you come in head on, they'll solidify. So you come in from the side a bit, and you're being honest. You're saying, look, I noticed, and I'll do this for calls. I'll say, oh, I noticed you're in such and such a drug. It's been a while since we've had a conversation. How is your pain? And people are actually you're quite disarmed at that point, because they don't have 3 other problems and a big crisis consultation that you're used to. So they're calm, they're in their own home, they feel like, oh, they're interested in my medicines, well, I've got this and I've got that, and then you can actually have a better conversation. So I think doing it in those ways, doing it as a team, taking your time, one drug at a time, that's probably, to my mind, the easiest way to do it as a practice. The other thing I would say as well is the NHS Ayrshire and Arran have got a brilliant website, and they've got videos. Antonio, so he's got one in the limits of medicines and an opioid-induced hyperalgesia. So I think actually giving people the videos is quite useful. So that's part of their becoming more informed, and that helps them. A lot of people want to come off the medicines.
Mm-hmm. I think there's increasing evidence as well from patients that they actually feel better when they've stopped, rather the pain's not any different, or they're actually better once they've stopped taking the medication. And the way I talk to patients about opioids is that, you know, there's all these dangerous side effects, and they say, oh yeah, I've been taking these things for years and I've been breathing all night and not dead yet. But the insidious ones, I think, are the effects on motivation and memory and concentration. And you know, there's that it was only recently I thought these are not working on opioid receptors, they're working on your endorphin receptors. And so when we learn our pharmacology, it's all about the 3 kinds of opioid receptors. But of course, you're not producing opioids yourself. It's the endorphins and enkephalins that which have much more enlivening and joyful effects on you, rather than the opioids, which tend to flatten you down and make you anhedonic. And we've just got a few minutes left. The time has whizzed by. Is there any burning questions for Kieran before?
I would jump in there a little bit, Stephen, and say that actually that's the value of screening for depression, because a lot of people are self-medicating their depression with their opioids, and actually, but there's no, again, you know, dementia and the Z box sort of thing, you know, and like zombie, and you'll see that the loved one will come in and say, my wife or husband's like a zombie, you know, and I think bringing them on as a treatment supporter as well, and say, well, what do you want? Well, I want to get my loved one back. And you say, well, let's work together, and then you actually explain it, and then you say, well, look, their PHQ-9 score's 25, you know, they're like they're really, really depressed. So actually do that, and you often see people as they're coming down off their medicines, they get their depression scores get worse as well, because they've been self-medicating a little bit. So I think that upstream screening for mental health is really helpful.
One last question is, have you ever thought of running group sessions for chronic pain patients in primary care?
We just did it on Tuesday.
Ah, great.
We did the flipping fibromyalgia, so 2,000 signed up for it, and there were 550 people with fibromyalgia on there. So it was Emma Mayer, I wasn't involved with it. It was Jen, who is OT in Glasgow. It was a GP in Lothian and myself, and then 2 people living with fibromyalgia on the panel as well, plus the kind of host, Cormac. So that was, I mean, incredibly powerful, and to do the questions. But actually coming to your question more specifically, funnily enough, it came up yesterday. I was at a cluster event, and there's a practice just about 4 miles from me, and they've got 14,000 patients, and they were going to do a group consultation idea for menopause, and they had 500 that want to go to this menopause group consultation out of 14,000 patients. So I think actually this is something we're looking at in the funding. But what happened, of course, was COVID came in, so it just kind of destroyed what we're trying to do. And if you put in digital like this, that's fine, but there's a digital divide, you know, and a lot of people living with pain, that's prohibitive. So there's definitely, I think, a high yield in doing it. It's just how to do it in the right way. So it's something that really interested in, and if people were interested in it, I'd be very supportive, and I'd want to kind of like be supportive in any way I could, because I think there's something about bringing people together, but it's how to do it and do it in the right way. So I'm learning as well about
that. Yeah, grand. Has anyone else got any questions for Kieran? I think your enthusiasm is amazing, Kieran. You're young and enthusiastic, not being, oh, well, I'm old and enthusiastic still, so don't worry. It's possible. You might last. I think one thing that has always mystified me, you know, since doing the lead clinician job years and years ago, is how we never get anywhere with undergraduate education, how we're not getting chronic pain management into that, and how it's still, you know, a Cinderella service. The chronic pain management clinics are, you know, just very sparsely staffed and resourced, and other things. You know, spinal surgery and all these sorts of things cost a fortune. We'll wonder about that. But I must say thanks very much, Kieran, for absolutely brilliant, inspiring talk. I was just looking up the hot topics as well. Is that just on RCGP? Have you got you subscribed to do that?
No, it's Scottish Government that are doing it. So I just sent them an email. It's if you go to Easton, and there's and Debs is doing it, and Heather Harrison. So kind of really high quality, you know, colleagues that are putting it all together, and they're trying to do case studies as well. Debs.
It's part of the polypharmacy guidance, I think, isn't it?
Thank you. Yeah,
it's on the polypharmacy website.
Perfect. And I just emailed them today, funnily enough, and to see when it's getting released, because I think the hope is to get it all together on the online website and with the app possibly as well.
I think it's part of the national stuff that's happening with the pharmacy pain stuff as well. So they're trying to sort of streamline guidance around chronic pain. So there's a lot of work going on around that, I think, with Debs and Heather.
Oh, perfect. I'll dig out the links and send them around the group as well. And your toolkit for primary care is on the Pain Team Scotland Facebook page. So I'll dig that out as well and send it around to everybody. It's really, really good. Excellent. Okay, right. I better get ready for my night at the opera and go off to see the Marriage of Figaro. But thanks again, Kieran. Fantastic, and thanks very much for everybody for coming. Spread the word, and I'll get myself organised to do another pain learning series at the end of May, I hope. Okay, I'll see you later then. Okay, all the best. Yeah, cheers.